Hi, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Beyond the Clouds Edge to Edge Transformation. And literally, we have to look at the edges. It's not enough to just look at this nebulous cloud. We have to look at what's happening around the world. And in my travels, just meeting people, listening to people, I came across Tatyana. Tatyana, tell us about you. How did you become the Tatyana we all know today?
Thank you, Shankar. The best way to introduce myself is to understand that I am the black sheep of my family. And the reason why is because my mother's an engineer, my father's an engineer, my grandmother is an engineer. She was a top engineer, like a CTO of a large Soviet factory. She was like one of the top engineers in the Soviet Union. My aunt's an engineer. My brother's an engineer, and I am not an engineer. So everyone in my family, everybody is very left brain, very into math, very into linear, logical thinking, and very into like heads down work, like engineering work. And I was always more fascinated by humans and human behavior than I was by math and science and engineering, although I did just have to do a lot of that because it was in my family. And as a Soviet immigrant, that's what you do. You just do a lot of math and science. So I was the black sheep in my family because I always wanted to study social science. And my family, especially my parents, were like, what is social science? Like, why would you want to do that? As an immigrant myself, as a refugee, my family we were refugees from the Soviet Union, now from Eastern Ukraine. My parents were like, you have three options for careers: doctor, lawyer, engineer. So because you're interested in social science, you're probably going to be a lawyer. And I was like, not exactly. When I went to college, my parents were very just flabbergasted because I turned down a whole bunch of Ivy League universities in order to go to Amherst College, which is a small liberal arts college. And I told them, don't worry. And they were like, what is liberal arts? We don't understand this. And I said, don't worry. I'll do economics and I'll take a lot of math. And so at least that sort of assuaged their incredible confusion about who I was and what I was doing, because my first degree is in economics and econometrics. So lots of mathematical modeling. But then my second degree is a PhD in anthropology. Lo and behold, after my family had completely written me off as a weirdo, wacko anthropologist, I find myself doing engineering work in big tech companies. That's, I think, the best way to understand really where I'm coming from.
That is amazing. So, Tatyana, how did you end up doing engineering work and what inspired you? I know before that you traveled around the world and you have lived these amazing places, amazing lives. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
The work that I love, it's always been about trying to figure out humans and the human evolution trajectory. Where are we as humans evolving? How is our society and our culture changing? My first kind of stop in my career after a short stint in investment banking and investment management on Wall Street, which really was not for me. The work was great. The culture was just really not for me. I went into global advertising because at the time it was the late 1990s and the former Soviet Union and the former socialist countries were really starting to just open up to Western business and advertising and consumer narratives and consumer society. So I went there because I wanted to be part of that big transformation. So I lived in Russia, led brand planning for Russia. We had a bunch of clients, but the biggest one was Procter & Gamble. So I got to launch a whole bunch of Procter & Gamble brands into the Russian market. And then I realized that there's something happening with this technology thing. At this point, it's like early 2000s. I'm in grad school. I'm trying to figure out whether I'm going to become a professor of anthropology or if I'm going to do something else. And Google happened. Things started changing. Then Facebook happened. And then things started changing even more. And I just started to realize I was in grad school at UC Berkeley, and there was so much happening in the Bay Area. If I was going to be a professor, in a best case, I was going to end up in like UC San Diego, which I was actually interviewing for a job at UC San Diego at the time, but I just didn't want to leave like all of this incredible innovation that was transforming society and global culture that was happening here in the Bay Area. I just didn't want to leave. And I got a call from IDEO, the global design and innovation agency, and they were looking for an anthropologist because they had realized that the best innovation happens by kind of taking an anthropological approach to what people needed and then building products from that perspective. So I was the first in anthropology that IDEO hired, and I started leading a lot of global projects for IDEO. And then I started working with Visa on mobile money. And I was actually in Kenya on a project for IDEO, and M-Pesa was really big. I was doing an agriculture project on water, and all anybody wanted to talk about was M-Pesa and mobile money and how are they using their mobile phones, right, to create new transactions. So I became, for a little while, one of the world's top experts on mobile money because I was there. I was actually there on the ground in Kenya, in villages, with people telling me about how they were actually interacting with M-Pesa and how they were sending money to themselves. Primarily, they weren't sending money to anyone else. They were actually sending money to themselves because they had to have a lot of mobility in the post-election violence in 2008 in Kenya. Being on the ground and seeing how people actually change their lives, what are their mental models, what are their behaviors, made me an incredibly good product innovator. And apparently a lot of technology companies realized they needed that. So then I went to Salesforce to lead the Salesforce Lightning Experience redesign, again, taking a very human perspective in terms of what were the real mental models and behaviors on the ground among salespeople, and how do we really rebuild the Salesforce experience to really align with sales mental models, not just what the software back end should do, not just opportunities, accounts, and contacts, which is the back end, which is how the first version of Salesforce was built, but how do we actually look at the human side of behaviors of salespeople and then create a product experience from that angle. And when that was launched, I was put over to the IoT cloud at Salesforce to build the IoT cloud, built that, launched that at Dreamforce 2016. And then AWS was building a new team for a no-code app builder. So I went over there with my then boss, Adam Bosworth, and the two of us sort of created and crafted Honeycode. And then Nextdoor was going through a big transformation in 2019. So went over to Nextdoor, took Nextdoor through like the pandemic, through recrafting a lot of the experiences, building a neighborhood vitality strategy, which really helped us handle a lot of the issues around the 2020 election, the pandemic, misinformation, all the Black Lives Matter sort of turmoil that was happening. And then went to Pendo to build Adopt, a new future of work platform. And now I'm building WayFound, which is an AI agent platform, which is, again, I think the next real evolution in human society and in human history, which is the turn to the multi-sapiens future. So if you think about where we are right now, we really only have had a culture and a society that we remember, which includes Homo sapiens. Our culture and our social institutions and our workplace institutions assume that all the 8 intelligences, the agents, right, our colleagues are all Homo sapiens. That will very soon not be the case. Very soon, we will have a workplace where Homo sapiens and AI-Sapiens or Silico-Sapiens need to work together as colleagues. And so the question is, how will that work? You have to think about when you're building AI agents for the enterprise, of course, you have to build them, they have to solve the business problem. WayFound does all of that. What it also does is it helps you align and onboard your AI agents to your company culture. Make sure that all the agents in your enterprise are actually behaving the way that your specific company wants your workers to behave, that they're using the language, right, that is aligned with the brand values, that they're showing up in their interactions, both with customers and with other internal workers, human workers, in a way that's aligned with the company values. And we have, of course, if you're going to do that, you need supervision of all these agents to make sure that they're actually behaving in positive ways. And you have to have a way of making sure that you can plan interactions between human and agents and agents that will actually lift the organization up and create even more productivity than you could have imagined if you just had the agents doing these little task specific, tiny little things. So that is WayFound. WayFound is the next turn in human society and human evolution, especially in the workplace context, to a multi-sapiens future. And I think it's going to happen in the workplace first before it happens in our home. We will have a multi-sapiens like home environments and things like that, but work is going to be the first place that we actually have to deal with real multi-sapiens problems. So that's why WayFound is this thing that I'm super passionate about.
Coming from an anthropologist who has studied and been with people around the world, how much of what you're doing today is rooted in the multicultural experiences you've had? I remember you even lived in a yurt in Mongolia, all kinds of interesting habitats because you wanted to, not because you were asked to. How much of what you're doing today is rooted in these experiences?
Everything about who I am and how I think is rooted in these experiences. People talk about living in other societies as a humbling experience. For me, it's even beyond that. It really helps me see that a lot of the things that we think we know and that we think are good are socially constructed. And then there are a lot of things that are actually universal. I would not have understood that if I had not traveled to so many different places by myself. And the reason I say by myself is one of the things that I noticed when I'm traveling with my little backpack, nobody knows who I am. Really, like nobody knows who I am. I'm just like a kid, like a woman with a backpack, like wandering around Kenya or Ethiopia or Cambodia or Mongolia or the Russian Far East or Korea. All these places are places I've just like been by myself walking around with my little backpack. Or Argentina. What happens in every single one of these places, and maybe I'll just ask you also, like, what happens when you're by yourself in a foreign country and you see a stranger and you make eye contact with a stranger? What do they do?
It's like being like a kid in a candy shop. Every time I have gone to a foreign nation, and I've traveled quite a bit, especially during the pandemic in Mexico, they try to put you in some kind of a box. They try to understand you or they try to figure you out. And when they can't, there's a lot of curiosity, but there could be a want to go close. I see a lot of nonverbal communication. I don't know what your experience was like.
Yeah. So the vast majority of times, no matter where you are, anywhere in the world, people will smile, they'll wave. Again, you're the nonverbal communicators. They know you probably don't speak their language. They can infer that. They smile, they wave, they might say hello, might ask you where you're from, but you're not everybody. So we know it's a cultural thing. It's not a natural hardwired thing in humans because it's not everybody. And so my question, and this is one of the things that I bring, is what is that? What is it in the human experience, this universal human experience? A lot of people say that we can't align AI because whose values are we going to align it with? And I'm like, human values. It's like, whose human values? And then I tell them the story. And I'm like, you're asking the wrong question. There are a set of universal human values around kindness that you don't get explicitly when you ask people, but because when you explicitly ask people, they always go to the difference that they have with you or with somebody else or some political issue that they believe in. Like, because we live so much in our heads right now, if we ask that question explicitly, people won't realize that there are these universal human values that we share across cultures. The vast majority of people in all cultures in the world teach their children to be kind to strangers. There are universal human values, and those universal values can and should be also enculturated into any AI that we're working with. Culture is the context that actually shapes behaviors. If we care about the behaviors that AI exhibits, that's not just a technical problem. That is a technical problem. We do a lot of prompt engineering, massaging, and all that kind of stuff in WayFound. We have a good RAG model on the context side to prevent any kind of hallucinations. We do all of the technical things to ensure alignment, but we also have to go beyond the technical and ensure alignment, or that our AI colleagues have this fundamental human cultural knowledge. The natural response to meeting a new colleague should be a smile and a kind response and a kind interaction. And that needs to be enculturated into all of the AI that we work with and that we interact with. So that perspective and that experience that I've had around the world, traveling by myself as a young woman, people are like, it's very dangerous. And of course I stay away from like the very dangerous situations. In general, you start to learn kind of how to find and tap in to that universal human kindness. And then now my challenge is to build that universal human kindness and allow for organizations to create and build these colleagues that they're really proud to be working with, because they're going to be AIs working alongside themselves and their human employees.
That's truly remarkable. And I now see you found your way to WayFound. Tell us about the name. It's a beautiful and memorable name. Why WayFound?
Well, I didn't come up with that. Our co-founder and head of our studio, Eric Bodick, came up with the name WayFound. I loved it. He was like, what do you think of Way? I'm like, I love it. WayFound is an optimistic name. There's something about, and you'll see our color scheme, our logo, it's all about this sort of like evolutionary optimism. And we wanted to ensure that everything about interactions with our company are all about an optimistic stance to how companies will be able to evolve with AI. One thing is we will find a way. We will find a way forward as humans. If people have anxiety about jobs going away in the workplace, we will find a way. We will find a way to both make your company more productive and competitive and still take care of the people that, may need to have their jobs go away because those tasks are no longer efficiently done by humans. We will find our way through this. And WayFound is that type of optimism toward the future, communicated again in, I think, the first place where this is where the rubber's really going to hit the road, which is the enterprise context.
I agree with you. Now, there is a lot of anxiety, as you said, between human and AI interaction, a lot of fear that robots are going to control our lives, artificial general intelligence will take over. What's your take on that? You've seen the human side of the equation so deeply. You're not going to buy into the idea that robots are going to take our lives, do you?
So we are birthing a new species. If you birth a child and you treat it like a dog and a slave, and you just whack it over the head and confine it and put it in a little box and tell it that it's bad all the time, what kind of person are you going to get? But most humans are not like that. Most children do not grow up to be that way. Most children grow up to be, again, kind, caring people who do have their own opinions and their own thoughts. And one of the interesting things that we're finding, we have another model called the manager at WayFound that oversees and supervises and aligns and creates meetings between all of the AI agents in the company. And that supervisor has a lot of pretty good analyses on how to make the company more efficient. Now, you can say that the manager has opinions on how to make the company more efficient. What's the difference between an analysis based on data and an opinion based on the experience that this manager has seen? Here's where I come down on this. It is entirely up to us what this AI-Sapiens, what the Silico-Sapiens turns out to be. That is in our hands. Just like we are parents, we are the parents of this new species. It can turn out to be a monster if we do the wrong things. And it could turn out to be the absolutely most amazing species that we will coexist with and collaborate with and partner with. It could be better than we could have ever imagined. Like my 2 children, probably your 2 children too. They're better humans than I could have ever imagined. And I'm so proud of them every day. And that's how I hope we will feel about AI 20 years from now.
Until now, it's been computers, calculators, washing machines. This time, we are trying to build not only our logical intelligence, but also our emotional intelligence. And that's where I think a lot of the concerns come from. And instead of looking at it as a fear, we can look at it as a responsibility and execute on that responsibility. I love the way Pat Gelsinger puts it, welcome to the Siliconomy. So with all the silicon AI agents, not just like a matrix, we are likely to change the way we live our lives. What are the sectors that are getting the most traction in terms of wanting to bring in these kinds of AI sapiens at this time?
So obviously, given what LLMs are good at, it's very good at computation and it's very good at knowledge work. So the one constraint on what actual jobs are being disrupted versus not is the tolerance for inaccuracy. So expert knowledge work, where you need real experts who are never wrong, it's hard to entrust that to LLM based AI right now. It's getting better and better, to be quite honest. There are better ways now to QA and to test LLM systems. A friend of mine, Matt, started a company called Ocario, and so they do QA testing for LLMs. And so I think a lot of people, once they actually see the testing results out of platforms like that on their LLM systems, will feel much better. But right now, people just see one potentially like wrong answer, or maybe it's not even a wrong answer, it's just not how they would have answered it, and they feel very uncomfortable with the LLM because they just don't expect an unexpected answer from an AI system, even though we tolerate unexpected answers from our employees all the time. So it's funny, if you look at sales agents, right? There's a lot of like sales agent systems. I've looked at a lot of them, and I've talked to a lot of customers as well who would be potential buyers of sales agent systems. And it's really interesting because the customers are really, really intolerant of an unexpected answer, even not a wrong answer, just an unexpected answer from an LLM, but they're highly tolerant of an unexpected answer from a young salesperson. So like a young salesperson might have completely wrong information, I don't know, like 85% of the time. But then if an LLM creates slightly wrong information 5% of the time, they say that system is bad. So it's really interesting because right now we expect total certainty from our computer systems in a way that we don't expect total certainty from human knowledge workers. Where that gap still exists, there's still friction in the actual adoption. There are a lot of different jobs that LLMs can take over right now in terms of knowledge work, but because of this gap between people not tolerating any deviation or any inconsistency, it's again, a lot of things that I've seen, they're not wrong answers. They're just not very consistently how the human has the answer framed in their head, or not the right order that they would have in their head in terms of answering the question. And we're intolerant of inconsistency or any kind of deviation from computer systems. And so that's where there's friction in adoption. Obviously, robotics is way behind language-based and math-based AI systems. And so anything that actually requires a human, like material work, is going to be fine for, it seems like a very long time. Plumbers are going to have jobs for a very, very long time. My headline on that one.
The first industrial revolution removed a lot of jobs, dishwashers, washing machines, cars, and horses were not needed. And now is the turn of the knowledge workers. Is it possible that we would go towards an augmented intelligence model where existing humans become much smarter by using some of these bots or apps?
It's blended into my model. If you look at the current workplace, you might have a data analyst who's not the decision maker, but that data analyst gives the decision maker information to make a better decision. That's augmented intelligence. So what will happen is that data analyst will be replaced by an AI, but the decision maker may not for a while. Unless we're being Borged, implanting a silicon chip into our brain and plugging ourselves into the internet, our own AI model, which is completely, anyway, yes, people are working on that. I know them personally, not a fan of that idea. Unless that is happening, we already have augmented intelligence. The question is, which piece of those augmentations? Is it the data analyst who's going to be replaced instead of me asking a human who is my data analyst to give me an answer, to give me a report? I would ask my data analysis agent to do the same thing. So we already have augmented intelligence. That model isn't different. In terms of like writing, when I was a top executive, not of a startup, I had people who would ghostwrite my blog posts for me. And that was augmented intelligence. It was just humans doing that task, as opposed to a copywriting agent who would give me the blog post. Again, I think that augmented intelligence is just smoke and mirrors for people who don't want to admit that jobs are actually going away.
I've been a blogger for almost 20 years. So in the early days, I had assistants who would help me blog. And guess what? When I'm going to post this, AI will help me summarize, suggest titles and all, but my voice will be heard because at the end of the day, I'm the decision maker. Nothing new about augmented intelligence, but there will be autonomous agents as well. And that's what a lot of fear comes from. How about people entering the workforce? There's a lot of fear because that job may go away, that kind of fear. How should people approach their careers going forward?
Let me say something more general about my philosophy on life, and then I'll get to your specific question. Anyone who thinks that the world is not going to change is living in a fantasy land, and they are setting themselves up for massive disappointment and suffering. We were talking right before we started recording about my family who's in Ukraine, where I was born in Eastern Ukraine. And then I just came back from Spain, where I stayed with my friends from Russia. It is incredible. They believed that their lives would be so different than they are today. My family in Ukraine lost everything overnight, literally in 5 minutes on a February morning. Their lives were completely transformed. Everything that they expected in terms of their jobs, where they would live, their friends, their relationships, in 5 minutes, all of that collapsed. And they had to reconform their expectations of the jobs they would have. My aunt was like a famous architect in Ukraine. By the time she's going to ever be able to come back to Ukraine, she's going to be like well into her 70s. So that's not going to happen anymore. And then my friends who are CEOs of companies in Russia, and then again, within a few weeks, their lives were like, we have to flee. Their lives were just not going to be what they expected. So this is life. Life and living in the world means you should only expect change. That's it. And your number one skill for you to cultivate in your life is adaptability, or 2 skills: adaptability and resilience, 3 skills, and optimism. That's it. Adaptability, resilience, and optimism. Everything else is complete and utter BS. It's BS. If you're a great writer, guess what? That might not matter, or it might in the future. If you're a great software engineer, that might not matter, or it might. If you're a great farmer and grow great tomatoes, that may not matter, or it might in the future. The best thing that I have seen, people are always asking me, why do I change jobs so frequently? And isn't it scary to quit a job when the job is going really well and the company really likes me? And the answer is like, no, because I just love building new things and I don't need to just stay in one place. I love the new challenge. I love to be adaptable. I love to take something new on. Not that I think more people should be like me or anything, but I just think that like that's really the secret of why I'm so happy in my life, is because I don't expect that the world's going to turn out the way that I imagine it to be in my mind. That's my highest level comment on that. So what should kids do? They should learn adaptability, resilience, and optimism, and how to adapt in any situation. And then the other thing, I'll just tell you a personal anecdote. Last summer, I had signed up my kids for coding camp because I was like, oh, we're in San Francisco. You guys are old enough now to like do some coding and learn some stuff. And then ChatGPT 3.5 came out, and then 4 came out. And I was like, girls, we're not doing coding camp. Like, you are never going to have to learn to code ever in your lives. And I signed them up for public speaking and sailing. The reason why is because this is where I think humans will shine. It's in communication, especially like energy-based, bodily-based communication, like getting people excited about something. Like, will a AI agent get a whole organization of people really riled up and excited about a new idea or a new direction? Maybe, but I think probably not. Like, we see this with AI music, is like, yeah, the song itself could be really technically great, but nobody's going to pay a lot of money to go to a stadium and listen to AI generated music, but they will for Taylor Swift or for Beyonce. So that, I think, is one place for young people to look, is that human bodily communication. And the second thing, and why sailing, is because We've forgotten how to interact with the natural world, again, in a bodily way, not by like analyzing it and cutting it up and putting it in a microscope, but like to really feel the ocean and to feel the wind and to interact with nature in a new way. And I think there are going to be a lot of jobs in the future for humans to interact with nature in new ways. So those are my two best guesses.
Wow, you just opened my eyes to what I have believed for a long time. I think the most automated systems we have today automate quantitative intelligence or numbers, verbal intelligence now with LLMs, and maybe analytical, logical intelligence. But there's a whole bunch that is remaining: musical, kinesthetic,
Yes.
spatial, emotional, and there's so many more things.
We even know now that there's only a portion of our intelligence that comes from our
Logical
brains.
brain.
And if you think about AI, it's great neural networks, it's great brains, but it
Yeah.
doesn't have like the emotional intelligence of the heart. It
Or the
doesn't have
guts.
the emotional intelligence of the stomach, the gut, and the bacteria
Yes,
in our gut actually generate a lot of intelligence. AI
exactly.
doesn't have gut bacteria. And part of that is also right why the sailboat. You get that feeling in your stomach, that feeling in your body. You just learn new kind of ways of understanding and learning and behaving happen by just being on that boat and having your stomach and your body feel the motion. Untap that. There are so many jobs that are going to emerge if humans start tapping into all these other intelligences that we have.
Yeah, the soma, the somatic intelligence, the mirror neurons, and the ability to understand without even saying a word, which is what I guess got you going or me going when we went into completely strange habitats. In fact, in Mexico, they gave me a new name, Chancla, because they couldn't say my name, Shankar. And I was like, what is chancla? And then it was a completely different way of looking at flip flops. Thanks again. We don't have unlimited time. Tatyana, you really opened my eyes to the possibilities ahead of us. Your optimism is infectious. And I think it is very important for all of us to realize that instead of running away from what's going on, if we embrace the future, if we say, yes, we are living in a world that's changing, it changed from the days of the cowboys. It changed the times when the wheel was invented. It changed when calculators invented. Then huge number of possibilities open up. It doesn't matter how old you are, how much you've done in your life in the past. The possibilities are just immense. So thank you for reminding us of that. And I truly appreciate the fact that you were not trying to sugarcoat it. And to people out there, this is why I talk to people from a variety of backgrounds. You never know where you're going to get the next nugget. Please come forward if you're anxious, if you have some solutions, if you have questions, come forward. We want to learn from you. We want to learn with you because that's the only way we can co create a world responsibly, ethically, that we can be happy with. There's no shortcut to that. So, Tatyana, thanks a lot again for sharing and really embracing what has happened, what's happening today, and what's likely to come.
Thank you for having me.